Welcome to Sage Advice. Today we have a very special guest, Jeffrey Izzo. Jeffrey Izzo is Associate Professor and Mike Kerb Endowed Chair of Music Industry Studies. Jeff has been an entertainment attorney for almost 30 years, representing songwriters, performers, independent record companies, authors, and filmmakers, as well as working as general counsel for a Seattle multimedia organization. In addition to being an entertainment lawyer, Jeff is an accomplished composer, lyricist, vocalist, and multi-instrumentalist. Jeff is also the author of Rough Seas, Uncharted Waters, The Musician's Guide to Navigating Copyright Law. He holds a Bachelor of Music in Composition from Berklee School of Music and a Master of Music in Composition from the University of Edinburgh, and has composed everything from pop songs and jingles to symphonic, choral, and musical theater works. Jeff, welcome. We're
Thank you.
so happy to have you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So as you know, Sage Advice is all about interviewing our lovely guests about their journey, about their life journey and their career journey. So where did it all start for you? Why don't we start at the very beginning?
Oh, the
A very
very
good place to
beginning.
start.
Okay, well, I was born. I built the log cabin I was born in. No, if we really want to go back to the beginning, it started with the Beatles. Like many musicians, I heard them. I was about 6 or 7 the first time I heard them or saw them on Ed Sullivan. And I don't know if it was the music, the guitar playing, or the screaming girls, but I just knew at that moment I wanted to play guitar. So my parents started giving me lessons and played guitar all the way through grammar school, up to 8th grade. Then I switched to piano because I was driving the car one day with my sister and heard this music that just was like, it blew me away, and it happened to be Elton John. So that kind of got me into playing piano. And I during my you're always trying to imitate your hero. So when I was playing guitar, you had a harmonica like Bob Dylan. I learned all the songs, and then I played piano, learned all the Billy Joel and Elton John songs. Went to Berklee College of Music, and as a composition major, and I've always loved writing songs and other types of music. Worked in New York after college for a little bit, being a songwriter and working on trying to get some shows and original music off the ground. Then I'll tell the joke I tell my students every semester, which is that little girl's driving along in the car, with her mom, and Taylor Swift is blasting out of the radio, and she's bopping along. She's about 8, 9 years old, and she turns to her mother and she goes, "Mommy, when I grow up, I want to be a musician." And her mother turns to her and says, "I'm sorry, dear, but you can't do both. Grow up, be a musician." So thank you. Applause sign, please. So at that point, I met the woman who was still miraculously my wife, and I decided to go to law school. And so we moved to Seattle, went to Seattle University School of Law, got into entertainment law after doing a little bit of this and that. Moved to Boston, did it there, moved back to Seattle, continued working as a lawyer, and then I decided I really wanted to get more back into music. So, and I love teaching, so I've adjuncted before, and I've taught. I've worked with children's theater, directing shows and writing music for children's theater. My two daughters were doing that when they were younger, and went to get my master's at Edinburgh, and I assumed I was going to go for a PhD so I could teach composition or something. But then all of a sudden, I got a job at University of Memphis teaching music business, which I didn't even know existed, quite frankly, because when I was in undergrad, no such programs. Anyway, so I took the job. It was just a 1-year position, and I progressed up through, like you named, the schools where I taught at, and eventually landed here in 2017 at CSUN, Cal State Northridge, where I've been since. And that's sort of the 50-cent tour of. I still write music. I still like to compose. I said I just had a book come out this year, so it's trying to keep busy and teaching and doing the normal professional stuff. So that's it. Thank you very much. Good night. No.
That was fantastic. I have a feeling you've pitched this before.
Yeah, it sounds like it's like it's from memories. Yeah.
I love it. Well, my first question, I'm going to derail us and then I promise I'll take us back.
No,
But I'm
just
curious.
go on.
As a Beatles fan, what did you think of Get Back?
I thought it was fabulous. I was like enthralled. I mean, I have the old Let It Be, a copy of the old Let It Be film,
Mm,
which is, I love it. It's, if it's what it is what it is. Get Back kind of took that and completely different, perspective. You know, there's been this ever since Let It Be the movie and the whole story about the breakup. It was just incredible how for decades everybody thought they hated each other.
oh, wait. And for anyone listening who is not familiar with Get Back, it's Disney Plus has it on there if you want to watch, but it's a mini
Yeah,
series, right?
yeah, it's three parts. It's directed by Peter Jackson of Lord of the Rings fame, and some other stuff.
Mhm.
Uh, but it it's like so over 6 hours. So there's like three
Right.
parts. There are like two. The first part's I think the longest. So between 6 and 7 hours. It just shows them as a band really loving each other and playing and really the, what I what I loved most about it, well, there's two things. The As a songwriter, it shows you the craft of songwriting, how these masterpieces just came together just from saying, why do you think of these lyrics? What do you think of this bridge? And it was like, okay, these are the Beatles like coming up with these like amazing tunes.
Yeah.
But the real thing about it was that you saw the joy of them just playing together, and for all the friction, they were really a family. They knew each other, and like any family, they fight and they argue. But you saw that joy when they would be playing on during the rooftop concert, for instance, or even just jamming in the studio. The connection, the communication was just amazing. I loved it. I'd watch it again if I could carve out another 7 hours of my life.
Truly. Truly. I think it was amazing to see the moments where whatever that lightning bolt of creativity hits, but exactly like you said, that you watch that hit, but it's not without needing craft. That you watch the moment come in, but oh, it's really like worked on and worked on and worked on and rehearsed and
Yeah, and,
rehearsed and
and that's the
rehearsed.
way it works. And a lot of people don't write music, and I'm not trying to like sound snobby or anything like that. But you hear a song by the Beatles or Ed Sheeran, or name the singer songwriter. It sounds effortless. It sounds like it just like popped out of their heads and got on the record, and then all of a sudden we're listening to it. But that's not how it works. Songwriting, composing, especially composing large works, it's a process of trial and error and revamping and revising and throwing stuff out and putting new stuff in. And to see them do that was really amazing. I just real quickly, just one scene that really stood out to me was there's this one. I think it's in part three. McCartney's playing like just doodling on the piano. Just I don't know. He's probably playing like something that became a masterpiece.
Mhm.
And Ringo's kind of just sitting there staring at him. And the interviewer guy is there, and he goes, we could just do 6 hours of watching this or something. It was just like wow. He was like still really impressed with Paul McCartney. Ringo. It's like that was great. It's just it gave
Yeah, that mutual admiration for
yeah
each other's artists,
right.
almost like you saw them, even if there was stuff happening as friends
Mhm.
on the side,
Yeah.
as soon as that admiration and joy and respect for one another as artists
Yeah.
didn't go away. And you saw
Yeah.
when how much they valued that and were willing to protect that.
Exactly, and that's I think was the great thing about that film. Totally opposite of Let It Be, which showed nothing but friction and arguments and Yoko Ono. I mean, Yoko Ono wasn't like a big deal in this film. I mean,
She was actually one of my favorite parts
she
because
was
in her
great,
own respect, she was an artist doing her own thing as well. I mean, she's a total performance artist and she's just
right?
I couldn't take my eyes off of her. I mean, the whole thing was such
Well,
an
she
ode.
she wasn't she wasn't like the thorn in the side that she has been made out the villain. Uh,
No.
because and the other thing, Linda was there. Linda McCartney was there almost as much as she was with the kids running around and playing with the drums. I mean, come on,
Yeah.
it was just it's just the family aspect of these musicians who were together for so long and knew their each other's thoughts and or what they were going to say. It was just I just loved it. Talking about it now, I want to go home and see it again.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
So,
Well, tying that back into you and your journey as a musician, now teaching the industry of music, at CSUN, also having a family. I imagine that a big part of understanding the business of music, and I'll relate it to being an actor and understanding the business of acting, it can feel counterintuitive. Is it? Do you find that is the business of music very counterintuitive to musicians who you teach?
Uh, I mean, I don't know if I would say counterintuitive. It's certainly different. It certainly requires a different sort of, left brain versus right brain type of thing. Um, I every interview I've ever been on for any job since I went to law school was like,
Mhm.
well, how'd you get from music to law? And it's like not that much of a stretch, really.
Mm,
Um, most entertainment lawyers I know, if not all of them, are musicians or actors. I had a good up in Seattle. I had a good friend. I haven't seen him in years. Who was a really one of Seattle's like leading entertainment lawyers, but he was an actor. Worked for was in some TV shows. Worked for Disney. Um, because, and I'm not saying they have to be professional musicians or actors, but when you have done that, first of all, you get the love of the for the art that you're involved in, and it
mm,
gives you the right perspective to deal with crazy musicians and actors and painters and writers because let's say we're all crazy because that's why we're they're creative and we've got that slightly insane part of our brains that take over and allow us to do this or makes us spend time good many hours of the day just trying to find that right phrase or that right chord or that right lyric or that
mm,
right inflection to say that line for this play.
mhm,
you know Knowing that perspective I think is invaluable when you're dealing as an attorney with musicians and other performers and other artists because you know what they're going through, you know what they're feeling. And lawyers get a bad rap, of course, but most entertainment lawyers, we really feel for our clients and the people we deal with because we know it's tough. We know it's like,
mm,
and then when it comes to copyright, where they're creating these works that have to be protected. I mean, to know what that feels like to write something or to play other people's music that is valuable to them, I think it's really valuable. So counterintuitive, I would just say it's just a different side of the coin, maybe,
mm.
you know?
Absolutely. That's a great way to look at it. And I think a lot of people might fear it because of
Mhm.
this idea that it would be that counterintuitive, but
Right.
take your class. And so you have this book, A Rough Seas, Uncharted Waters, The Musician's Guide to Navigating Copyright Law, particularly with musicians. I know nothing about copyright law.
Well,
So I'm a good person to ask you questions about this.
$5 in my pocket, whatever, I don't know. I don't even know what I get nothing for a sale, so don't worry about it.
so um but what are for someone who's brand new to it, or particularly for musicians who haven't even contemplated this when they probably should, at what point do you need to start thinking about copyright law? And what is there sort of a number one, if there's like a major thing for an up and coming musician to pay attention to or know, what would that be?
Um, as soon as you start playing music, certainly as soon as you start writing music, you need to know about the copyright law. Because if you're playing other people's music, and let's say your band is on YouTube, you upload a music video of a live, a live gig or something like that. Um, you're treading into the uncharted waters, if you will, my fancy title, of copyright law. Because do you have permission to do that?
Mm,
Well, you better make sure you do because you can get shut down, you can get sued. Um, as a writer, composer, lyricist, playwright, I mean, it's for musicians because I teach in a music department, but it goes, the lessons or whatever I go through in that book really applies to any creative art. Um, as soon as you put pen to paper and come up with something creative, then you're in the world of copyright because your copyright attaches as soon as you do that. So you need to like at least have some familiarity. And again, there's so much out there now that we live in a virtual internet web world that you could just like learn just about anything. Just go to
mm,
YouTube and looking at lectures and or finding stuff online. Um, what I always tell my students, and I think I make this point several times in the book, is that you really once you write something, create something, um, register it with the Copyright Office. That is extremely important. It's not required, but if you want to sue somebody for infringement, or if someone sues you for infringement, you have to have your works registered. And it's very easy now. Everything's online, but that, it's the best $55 you'll ever spend on, because it'll give you, it's like buying insurance. What
Mm,
registering your works does is give you a, um, if you have to go to court, it is a rebuttable presumption that you are the valid copyright owner. So you show that you show your little registration paper to the judge, and okay, you are the owner. Now the other party has the burden to kind of prove that you're not the owner. So very important to do that. Those are like the two, the two main things I think, you know, I would say anyone in the creative arts has to kind of get a handle on. And then there's all, what can you use, what can't you use? Can you use stuff without permission? If as a teacher, I depend on fair use, which is, being able to use certain materials without asking permission for educational purposes,
mhm,
so I mean, there's a lot of stuff to know about and to kind of learn about. And again, I'll say musicians, but I mean everybody. Anybody
mhm.
who's creating things should at least have some kind of basic knowledge of what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even this that tidbit alone. And so at what stage when it's a complete, I guess I'm thinking as a playwright,
Mhm.
um, as a songwriter, is it at the completed stage, or is it, let's say you have a song and you're going to rewrite that song, you suggest doing it right away up front?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, you don't really want to spend the money until something's done, but because, but once you have it complete, whether it's a song or a play or a book, um, you want to register it relatively soon,
Hmm.
and you can change it, and without having to re-register it, because you're the author, so you can do whatever you want with it.
Okay.
And at some point, if things, if you radically change something, if something starts out as a short story and turns into a 3-volume novel, well,
Right.
then you want to re-register it, obviously, because it's kind of transformed into something else. But yeah, it's just getting something out there, in the on the record that shows you are the creator. Now, here's another tidbit for musicians, specifically,
Yes.
that no one really, I should say no one, but a lot of musicians don't understand. A lot of filmmakers don't understand, um, uh, that there are two. When you go listen to the song "Let It Be," okay,
Mhm.
we'll go back to the Beatles.
Yeah.
Well, there are two copyrights at work there. There's the song "Let It Be," and then there's the recording of "Let It Be." The
Oh.
recording has its own copyright. So, and that's where, I you know, semi joke with my students, saying there's two things I want you to remember if you forget everything else. Is one, that the definition of a copyrightable work is an original work of authorship fixed in a tangible medium of expression. Meaning, if you have something original, that you haven't copied from someone else, that you write it down, you record it on your computer and your phone, on a tape player, whatever, then you have copyright protection. Um, the other thing I always tell them is that as musicians, you have to remember the difference between the song and the sound recording. So, in other words, like I said, "Let It Be," "Stairway to Heaven," "Stay with Me," you name the song. There is the song itself, whether you want to call it the sheet music or the arrangement of the notes, the harmonies, and the lyrics, that has a copyright. But as soon as you record it on a hard medium, then that recording itself has a copyright.
Interesting.
And where does this become important? Now I'm going to really start boring the audience here, this the television studio audience. If you're a filmmaker and you're trying to use "Let It Be" for your movie,
Yeah.
well, and you want to use the Beatles version of "Let It Be," well, you have to seek two licenses,
Wow.
because you have to get license from the publishers or the songwriters, and the license from the record label, who will own the sound recording rights. And those two things are completely different. They have different stream of rights that flow to them. Um, that's really one of the most important things that I try to, over and over again, remind our students.
Wow. Yeah, that's very informative. And we have a lot of at the foundation, we definitely have a large amount of musicians that I
Oh,
think
I know.
would find this
And
very
filmmakers too.
and filmmakers as well. We did a whole a documentary filmmaking series, and we had a whole webinar on copyright because
Oh,
I know, and I know it can still get confusing. I think because one of the things that always boggles my mind, or not but if we could get a little philosophical, if you will,
right.
is the idea for artists, especially when you're like, well, all artists are stealing in some ways from other
Yeah.
artists.
Right.
There's five stories, etc. So I think copyright can sometimes feel like uncharted waters, if you will. um, Rough seas where you might get, oh, what's the difference between, and certainly I know I hear songs where I'm like, that sounds just like this other song, but I know it's a different song.
Right.
I mean, that seems like that might be, how do you know you're not, for young musicians, writing a song and then you find out someone wrote that song?
And that's a real, that's a, that's a hazard because you really don't know.
Yeah.
That's why, I do teach songwriting here.
Oh,
And
cool.
one of the things that not just I do, but anybody who teaches or coaches on songwriting is to get as much feedback as you can. Play for your friends, play for your family, go out at a gig and play, go to an open mic night and play
Hmm.
your tunes. And then you'll know whether somebody will come up to you and say, that sounds just like the chorus for, whatever, Stairway to Heaven. I always use Stairway to Heaven. So unfortunately, you don't know until someone tells you.
Mm.
That that's why it's good to know. Well, yeah, it sounds like it, but it's different. The lyrics are different. The melody's slightly different. So I'm okay. And you could only know that by knowing a little bit about the copyright law.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, you're right. It's very weird because when we're talking about um, the arts, they exist and we're exposed to them. And this day and age, especially, you go on YouTube or you see things, you can see whatever you want. You can watch any TV show, clips, movies, music, and it just seems like, well, it's out there, so it should be okay. I could use it. I could do whatever I want with it. Well, that's not true. And that's what you
Right.
have to keep in mind. But that is counterintuitive. That the arts exist for us to enjoy and enhance our lives, and there's this like horrible law that kind of clamps down on everything. But it is it is important because you want to protect the creator. Um,
Hmm.
from day one of the copyright law, the first real copyright law started in England with the Statute of Anne. It was called in 1780, I think.
Hmm.
Um, but it's always been a clash of two opposing forces. We have on one side we have the artist, the creator, the writer, the composer that we want to protect. We want to be able to have them, have control over their works and be able to, to benefit from them, monetarily or otherwise. And on the other side, you have the public who wants free access to these works because they want to enjoy them, they want to use them. Why can't I write why can't I do my own sequel to, Harry Potter? Why can't I start my
Right.
own Harry Potter universe? Why not? It's out there. It's been so popular. Well, yeah, I mean, in a perfect world or some kind of, well, not for me, perfect world, but in someone's perfect world, that would be great. But there's always been this clash, and some periods of the copyright law, at least in this country, have favored the creator, and some have favored the public.
Hmm.
So now I think we're in the creator favored right a phase because of the length of the copyright protection, which is life plus 70 years. Um, and a lot of people don't like that because they figure, well, I have to wait until the composer dies and then 70 years after that before it enters the public domain, the music. Public domain means that copyright has
Right.
lapsed and run out. So yeah, so there's always been this clash. And I
Hmm.
think that's the counterintuitive part, going back to the
Yeah.
word you used earlier.
Yes, thank you for that. This might be opening a whole Pandora's box, but I'll go there.
Oh, please.
How has the development of NFTs affected copyright law?
Well, this is not going to open any worms because I still am struggling with NFTs and
Yeah.
what they're about and what good they are. First time I heard of someone talk about this a few years ago. This was, I think,
Mhm.
pre-pandemic, maybe I forget. I went to a webinar or a seminar, panel discussion, and it was all about NFTs. And I came away with that just with one impression, which was it's sort of an answer to a question that no one has really asked. I just still don't understand, and I hate to say that because I'm a lawyer, I should know that, but it's been explained to me. I've gone to seminars.
Right.
I still don't understand the value of them. If they don't, you can't really do anything with them. Um, I mean, I guess they're sort of like futures. Like if you go to play the stock market, and you buy stocks, they call them futures. It's worth $10 today, but you pay me $1,000 and it'll be worth even more in the future or something. I don't know.
Right.
NFTs seem to be like that because you're not really getting licenses or you're not getting permission. You're just getting sort of the chance to get permission later on. So I think they're still, I mean, they're starting to get very, prevalent especially in visual art.
Hmm.
Um, but I don't think the copyright law really has run into any clashes with that yet. And
Okay.
I can't think of any cases that, I mean, there might be some going on soon enough, but I just, yeah, so far I don't see any. I haven't seen any. You might ask another lawyer who does a lot of litigation or something that will say,
Right.
no, no, I'm involved in one right now. So, but I mean, certainly the case law hasn't really addressed that yet.
Okay.
So,
Interesting. Yeah. I just asked because they both seem to be areas of different types of ownership over a thing that, again, like we're saying, feels somewhat ephemeral.
yes,
And
perfect word.
um so it is fascinating in that regard, and yet any artist knows what it feels like when you're like, wait a minute, that was, I feel like that was my idea. It's very confusing when you're like, I'm an artistic vessel, and certainly we are all pulling from this giant human collective unconscious, and yet
No, absolutely.
it's my idea.
No, yeah, and the thing about turning specifically to music, but you could apply this to like other art forms as well. Pop music, Western pop music, has a very limited vocabulary.
Hmm.
Um, so it's hard not to sound like other people because that's just the way. And I don't want to start talking about the blurred lines case or anything, but when you get into
Hmm.
like feel and groove, that's another thing. Is like, can you really copyright like a drum groove or a
Hmm.
feel of a song? So you have all these ephemeral aspects and these sort of like intangible aspects that play into music and other creative arts that it gets really hard to decide what's copied, what's not copied. And again, we're talking about like classical, so-called classical music or symphonic music. That's a different uh, can of worms, in my opinion, because there's so much going on there. And it's not, anything goes basically. But in pop music, I mean, it's where everybody uses the same chords, and there's a famous several versions of the videos of this Australian comedy rock group called Axis of Awesome. I don't know if you've ever seen it,
Hmm.
um, but it's called the Four Chord Song. So they go through about 30 or 40 songs, a medley that all use these same chords, and the chords are the ones. If you know the song "Don't Stop Believing" from
Hmm.
Journey, those
Yeah.
four chords, and they literally go through about 40 songs, and it's amazing. I
Oh,
mean,
wow.
so there are things in like the copyright law that can't be protected, like those four chords, because they're overused so much. And
Yeah.
what's important is the melody and the lyrics that are on top of that. But it's just, if you ever get a chance, Axis of Awesome, four chords, just Google that. I show it to my copyright class every semester because it is just, it's a,
Oh, cool. We will.
yeah.
Maybe if it's not a copyright infringement, I can play a clip on this video.
Oh
I'll
no, please,
consult you
yeah,
after.
please do. I can send you the link.
We'll definitely share the link
Yeah.
in the notes of this because that sounds
Okay.
really interesting. I feel
Yeah.
like the most recent copyright lesson I got was on I've been watching The Rehearsal. I don't know if you've been watching Nathan Fielder on HBO, but it had me go back to Nathan For You, and he has that episode called Dumb Starbucks
Oh,
or
really?
his
Yeah, no, I haven't
but his
seen.
whole thing was he wanted to help this guy with his coffee shop. And so he found out, he was like, well, why don't we just call it Starbucks? And then people will come. And he's like, well, that's you can't.
Can't
But
do that. Right.
he found the loophole, which was if you're making fun of it.
Yeah.
But like the whole episode is then if you're making fun of it, you have to have a history of like satire on such things. So then he goes and like creates himself, like then he does a whole art show to prove that he has a history as like an artist who does
Yeah,
satire.
I mean, the whole thing about, I mean, Starbucks is that's more of a trademark thing, so it's a little
Yeah,
different.
I guess that's more trademark.
In copyright, you can parody something and it could be fair use. Um,
Hmm.
and so I don't want to get too didactic here or too, you know, splitting hairs or anything, but there's a difference. The law sees a difference or considers there's a difference between parody and satire. So satire is just something that's just simplifying the definitions here. Satire is something that is just in and of itself humorous or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
funny, stupid, silly. Where parody is is supposed to be making fun of something else and making a commentary on something else.
Mm.
So for that reason, and there's a famous case that I'll just mention real quickly, the courts have allowed certain parody if they satisfy, the other elements of the fair use law to be
Mm.
considered fair use. So the famous case that really kind of solidified this was uh, the Pretty Woman case, we call it. It was Two Live Crew did a bawdy hip hop, R-rated version of Pretty Woman by Roy Orbison. Went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, said, well, it's parody. It's making a commentary on.
Mm.
This is the actual phrase they used: the white bread, naivete of the original. So,
Hmm.
so again, this is something. Well, how would you know that? What if a court said no? It's not making any commentary. It's just a stupid version of, and it's really funny. I mean, I'm not saying it's stupid. I'm just saying if a court said that.
Right.
Um,
That's fascinating because you're sort of like, oh, the court is now in the position to be an art critic.
Well, I mean, it's not so much an art critic, but they because what they're not supposed to do is make aesthetic judgments about anything. But what they're doing is saying, well, look at what Two Live Crew has done here.
Yeah.
That satisfy the fair use law. The fair use law is like it's too much here. It's very kind of complicated.
Google it
Yeah, it's well, yeah. I mean, I do a whole like two classes on it basically.
or go to school for it.
Yeah, take my classes. Come on. No, so what the court needs to do is they see this happening and they say, well, here's the law. Let's see if it satisfies or is contrary to what contrary to what the law says.
Yeah.
And they determined that Two Live Crew's version of this classic rock song was parody, and as such, it should be protected, and they didn't have to ask permission. They did ask permission from the publishers and were refused, and they went ahead and
And did it
recorded
anyway.
it anyway. So yeah, so you should Google Two Live Crew Pretty Woman and see that's
We'll also link that in the
yeah,
show.
yeah. Most people know the original song. I mean, it's very famous, obviously.
Right.
So, but when you hear this one, you'll say, "Oh, okay." I can see why there might have been a lawsuit because it's totally.
Yeah.
So they copy like the famous guitar line, "Na, na, 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 na,"
Mm-hmm.
and it starts off with "Pretty Woman, won't you walk my way?" A couple of the first lines, and then it goes,
Was
off
it the original? Who sued?
The
Who lived?
publishers for the Roy Orbison song, Acuff Rose, who owned the
Okay.
music rights, they sued Two Live Crews Publishing, Skywalker Music, it's called, which
Okay.
should be another lawsuit in my opinion. It's spelled differently though. So, I mean, it's a very famous case. If for geeky lawyers like me,
Uh-huh.
fair use. It's sort of,
Okay.
yeah. So just yeah, but listen to the two songs or the Two Live Crew version. It's quite eye-opening or ear-opening, I should say.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think these are really interesting. I think these are interesting things to all creatives because like we're discussing dealing with the ephemeral, but it's important in the real world. And once you have your creative baby, you want to protect it. So thank you for that. That's great. As we wrap up, I just want to ask, as we ask all our guests, are there any final sort of mantras, words of wisdom that you like to live by in your life and your career?
Um, does it have to be legal or it could be anything? It just,
It could be
I mean,
anything. Yeah.
I just think taking risks is important for anybody.
Mm,
I like to speak in metaphors and analogies. That's what lawyers do a lot, and lyricists too. Um, there's two ways to drive across the United States. You can go Route 80, and this is really what I tell young people. You can go Route 80, where you get from New York to LA in the quickest amount of time possible, and you'll get to your destination. Or you can do, I'll say Route 66, which doesn't really exist, but the side roads.
mm,
Side roads will take you longer, and you may break down and you may get caught in a tornado. But at the end of the journey, you'll have so many more stories, and it'll be so much more interesting as you're lying on your deathbed to remember that stuff rather than just, yeah, well, I did it really quickly and it was great. So I say take risks, take the scenic route through life, if you can. Not everybody has a luxury to do that. And I think that's what makes life rewarding is that just try different things and don't be afraid.
that's awesome. Thank you so much. This was a pleasure to have this conversation.
Oh,
And we will link
I loved
to
it. Great.
Yeah, we'll link to your book. We'll link to any place people can learn more about you,
Yeah.
certain your Flowell profile, and all of those awesome clips that we talked about.